You're listening to This is Yoga Therapy. I'm your host, Michelle Lawrence, and I've had the opportunity to interview many of those who are making a difference at the intersections of yoga and health. And I'm here to share with you their stories and conversations. Thanks for listening. In today's episode, I interview Julia Romano. Julia is a certified yoga therapist and a licensed professional counselor. She's a former faculty member with the Maryland University of Integrative Health's Masters of Science in Yoga Therapy program and a supervisor in its clinical program. She also worked as a yoga therapist with patients in acute care of Howard County General Hospital. Julia is the author of Yoga Therapy for the Whole Mother, Developing Awareness in Service of Postpartum Healing, which was published by Singing Dragon last year. And we're going to talk more about her book and her work on the podcast today. It's such a pleasure to meet you and have you here, Julia.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Wonderful. Well, let's just start by having you share more about yourself and what brought you to yoga and yoga therapy and why you were called to write your book about motherhood and the postpartum experience.
Thank you. Yes. So what brought me to yoga and yoga therapy feels like a few lifetimes iteration of unfolding, becoming, if you will. I was a Los Angeles teen. Those of you familiar with Los Angeles may know that disordered body image and eating, negative self-concept are birthrights if you're a Los Angelina. And I came to yoga not really liking my body or loving myself, and through yoga found reassociation with my body, but also my being. I came into contact with myself in a loving way, and it was the first time in my young adult life that I experienced that. And that planted the seed. I took a pretty circuitous route to yoga therapy. I decided first that I had to travel across the world and study international relations and conflict management. That was my first master's degree. And then I decided I wanted to study psychology because I wanted to solve the world's problems through the lens of psychology. So that was my second master's degree in clinical psychology. And then I realized as I was undergoing that degree that actually the most joy I was having every day and the most benefit I felt I was offering every day was to my students in my nightly yoga classes. And so I decided that maybe clinical psychology wasn't the right approach. Maybe I'd try out this thing that I saw an ad for in Yoga Journal. I think it was yoga therapy. And I was a member of the first cohort at MUAH. I guess 2015, I graduated. So it was kind of a circuitous path. When I look back, it feels like a straight line, even though at the time a lot of different turns and twists took me to the degree and eventually back to teaching at MUAH. But my work remained grounded in that initial impression of yoga and its therapeutic benefits for both mind and body. I came to see mind and body as not just connected, but really fundamentally made of the same stuff. And I felt called to explore that relationship. I've done that in the book, as well as I've explored a field that has become very relevant to me personally, right? We teach what we know. In the last 8 years, I've had 4 children. And so I am postpartum 4 times over. And I wanted to fill what I felt was a void in the yoga therapy world, and that is offer a truly holistic text to address postpartum healing.
That's so beautiful. It's interesting. I didn't grow up in Los Angeles. I grew up on the other coast in New Jersey. And yet I can so relate to some of the things you said about really disconnection. And that was really what made me fall in love with yoga and gave me that first taste of connection. And I pursued my path in a different way than you did, but here we are, right, working in this field of yoga therapy, understanding the tremendous healing that it offers.
Yeah.
And I just love the title of your book. I love what I understand about your book. So let's talk about it a bit more. Yoga Therapy for the Whole Mother. And your approach that I understand within it really resonates with me and my postpartum experience. I have twin girls. We were talking about that a little bit before we
Mhm.
started the podcast. You do too. It sounds like the book is intended for yoga teachers and yoga therapists, but I feel like it's also relevant for practitioners. Maybe you can share more about that, the intention or the audience for the book, as well as some of the major themes or premises of the book.
Absolutely, yeah. So the book is actually two books in one. Well, so the subtitle of the book is Developing Awareness in Service of Postpartum Healing. And the subtitle was added as I wrote the book. I realized I am not just writing a book about postpartum. I'm writing a book about a concept that I had developed through my master's, through my MUH master's, where kind of my final project, my final essay for the whole degree was about what I called then disordered body awareness. And it was the idea that we cannot reassociate lovingly with our body when we have become perceptually numbed to it. So the more that we avoid seeing ourselves, really truly seeing ourselves, not just in the mirror, but being aware of the sensations of the felt experience of our body, what we know in yoga therapy as interoception, the more we avoid that experience, the less capable we are of it. And through research, and all of it is available actually on my website, all of the research that's informed this concept of disordered body awareness, through research, discovered that there's grounding for that. I didn't just make that up. When we avoid paying attention to ourselves, the neuronal footprint of what is attention diminishes. And so that told me that in order to be able to pay attention to ourselves, we need to practice paying attention to ourselves. And that's where the asana comes in. That's where the physical shapes, not just a warrior two, but even a shavasana, can be an opportunity to pay attention to ourselves and thereby build the muscle of paying attention that becomes the muscle we utilize when we are trying to do life's heaviest lifting, which is to regard ourselves with love and compassion. And the central treatise of disordered body awareness, of developing awareness so that we can see ourselves more clearly, I realized I needed to present at the outset of the book because it underpins the rest of it. In the book, I refer repeatedly to awareness as our North Star, to awareness as treatment in and of itself. So the protocols I offer are relatively simple. I think simple is better in general, but especially in yoga therapy, especially when we're working with people like mothers who are tired and overwhelmed and for whom life is complicated on its own. They don't need our complicated interventions. They need our presence and our direction, and ultimately what I call the development of unconditional positive self-regard, which is kind of a turn on Carl Rogers' phrase of unconditional positive regard, which is what a therapist would model. So the book is two books in one, a treatise on the development of awareness, as well as a comprehensive look at the many conditions of the postpartum period. And I use the kosha model as a lens. So I address conditions of the Annamaya kosha. I've got a chapter, first of all, on giving birth and the many ways that we might give birth. I've got a chapter on breastfeeding or nursing in general, or bottle feeding, both, because bottle feeding has as many postural challenges as breastfeeding does. I mean, I'm talking about conditions from anemia to diastasis recti to back pain to really basically anything that you can think of that occurs in the physical body. I tried to give some support to that. And from there, I moved to the breath and energetic body and explore conditions of the breath and energetic body in postpartum. I identify breathing disordered breathing, not specific breathing disorders per se, but disordered breathing like shallow breathing and how that might impact the postpartum experience. I also look at fatigue. I look at stress. And then in the Monomaya Kosha, I explored depression, anxiety, rage, guilt, shame, psychosis, identity issues. And then I kind of turn the head on it a little bit and look at the wisdom body as the lens through which we can approach the rest of the ailments that we see in the rest of the koshas. And Anandamaya Kosha, too, I offer protocols for the development of not just joy. I think sometimes joy is a little bit too superficial for how I've experienced Ananda, especially in the context of motherhood. I think of Ananda in motherhood like the first moments of staring into my child's eyes, and it's awe. It's awe. It is wordless, shapeless, boundless awe. And it's also, in some terribly wonderful way, the knowledge that everything we bring into life passes. And that, of course, is right there with you in that first moment of holding your baby. So I try to bring some breadth and depth into Ananda in the book as well, because the postpartum experience, even if you don't have that from pre-motherhood of this bigness of Ananda that is even tinged with a little bit of pain because it's still seen through the human lens, postpartum, in my experience and in working with my clients, certainly delivers that. So I try to, again, breathe into Ananda in a different way in the book than I think maybe seen elsewhere. So it really, truly is comprehensive, and I feel very proud of it. I think it fills a void in the literature, and it's not just experiential. I also lean very heavily into the research. Unfortunately, my publisher couldn't publish another 60,000 words, so I had to take out all of the literature reviews that I had developed as I crafted these protocols, but they are all available on my website. So if a therapist wanted to see, well, how did Julia come to this understanding of disordered body awareness, you can go to my website, and I've got all of the resources, all of the citations, and the lit reviews for every article that has informed every protocol in the book. So it truly is comprehensive. It's an experience of both the practical as well as, I hope, the more philosophical and experiential aspects of yoga therapy and postpartum.
Wow. I just want to pause for a moment and say, wow. It really does sound so comprehensive. And I want to highlight a couple things that you mentioned. One is awareness as your North Star and awareness as treatment. I think that is so important for us to all hear as yoga therapy or yoga therapists or working in the field of yoga therapy. You know, you're talking about postpartum, right? And in this unique situation, I find it to be so incredibly true regardless. And I think you're saying that too, because of your sort of, background or backdrop to the book. And then the other thing around simple is better, I wholeheartedly agree. Of course, I can see how that is the case with postpartum women because of, time and just demands. And yet, again, I feel like it's so important probably for many of the clients that we're working with, because overwhelm is a general state of our culture right now. I do really want to just kind of mention those things again because they stood out for me and, just so comprehensive. It's interesting too, your approach, I think, works for so many different situations. I'm developing a mentorship program right now for our yoga therapy program around a whole person approach to menopause. I feel like, what you've described here with, of course, different practical aspects, but from the same sort of framework is really what I have in mind too for that particular program. And I think we could say that about lots of different situations too. And, we often use the koshas as a lens for our work. And so it's no surprise, but you take it to a really interesting level here. So I can't wait to take a closer look at the book. I've looked at really just excerpts at this point.
Well, I am gratified to hear you say that, and I wholeheartedly agree. I want to make sure that I say two things here, but I want to respond directly to what you said just now, and that is that I think that the yoga therapy lens, the Panchamaya Kosha, is particularly positioned to be the lens through which health is viewed. And before we got on this phone call, I was drafting a letter to my senators. Actually, I'm going to send it out to even people for whom I'm not a constituent, because I just did a blog post on, it's called Postpartum is Apolitical. Because what I want is for postpartum care to be front and center of moving forward in this country. And I want yoga therapy to be the lens through which postpartum care is viewed. So one of the things that I'm also working right now on is an assessment tool that practitioners could use. I'm talking about health practitioners, allopathic health practitioners could use to assess new mothers. And that means that when you go in, you don't just answer a 6-question brief depression index that doesn't really give any data and no one answers honestly. It means that the health practitioner has specific questions to ask: ailments in the physical body, challenges in the breath and energetic body, challenges in the psycho-emotional realm. And then partnered with those responses would be a referral list. Oh, you expressed that you're having difficulty with urinary incontinence. Here's a referral to a pelvic floor PT. Oh, you're experiencing intense fatigue or rage. Let's do a full hormonal battery on you assessment, and we'll figure out what that looks like. What are your hormones looking like when you're postpartum? I want the kosha lens to be the thing through which health is viewed, because it is comprehensive by nature. And once we help practitioners understand, one of the things that I was passionate about at MUIH was, yes, honoring the roots of our tradition, but also making our language accessible to people outside of the tradition. Because I don't really care what you call it. I want you to know that the wisdom body is just as important a tool in a person's health as is looking at their physical body. Because unless they have the capacity to discern their condition, their current condition, they probably won't be able to access the correct care for whatever else is going on. I want to help the world. Truly, I'm very passionate about this, as you might be able to hear in my voice. I want the allopathic realm to know that this exists. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm developing this assessment tool, which I think could be the means by which practitioners begin to assess postpartum women in general. And it would require kind of some shifting of the system, but I think it's doable. And I'm trying to put myself out there as somebody who's willing to take the reins on this, because I truly am. And also as a licensed professional counselor, as somebody who works in mental health specifically, I want to pull this into the mental health realm as well. Because when we see a client who's suffering from depression, I want to know what's going on in their body. I want to know what's going on in their breathing, right? I'm a yoga therapist at heart. So for real healing to take place, the integrative approach is the only way forward. So I want to make sure that I said that, but also I want to return to this idea of who is this text for? And I think it's for yoga teachers, it's for yoga therapists, it's for health practitioners who maybe have familiarity with yoga but are looking for, and I know this is a sticky issue within the yoga therapy field, but if my obstetrician who goes to yoga on the weekends would get a copy of this book, maybe she'll be able to bring some of it into the work that she does, or primary care, et cetera. So I want it to be accessible to health care practitioners outside of the yoga therapy context. It is also for mothers. I hesitate to make mothers the front and central audience for the book, because one of the central tenets of the book also is that mothers need support. So that's why I say, yes, if you are a mother who has experience in yoga, this is a book for you. And I hope that you have someone who can put their arms around you and help you do the work. I don't want a mother to feel like this is one more thing on top of it. I know that, as I've done pelvic floor therapy or gotten chiropractic care or gotten, hormonal assessments, one of the most important aspects of that, when it has been the most effective and healing, is when it has been in the context of another healthcare professional who deeply cares and supports me in the work. So I don't want a mother to take the book on and think, oh God, I got to read this 336-page book and figure out how to not be depressed on my own. No, maybe it's a book you bring to your therapist and you say, hey, all right, can we work through some of these protocols together? I feel like it might be useful, but I know I can't do it alone because my goodness, as I am known to say, it takes a village to raise a mother to raise a child, right?
Yeah.
Sisterhood sisterhood is the solve of motherhood. We are not supposed to do this alone. The red tent, I don't want it to just be a metaphor anymore. I want it to be the thing we aspire to. So for new mothers to pick up this book, yes, good, and know that no one expects you to do it on your own, right? And, people can reach out to me if they need support. And I hope that maybe a new mother takes it to her yoga therapist and says, hey, let's work through this together.
Right. Wow. I love your passion. I love what you're thinking, what you're doing, this assessment tool. I am so supportive of those kinds of initiatives. And I do think that it takes us to do them. And so I recognize that too. And I so applaud you in that. I'm like cheering you on 100% here. And maybe this inspires others, right, to look at ways in which, different applications, but this holistic, whole person approach can be assessed via healthcare. I think that's really where we need to be.
Yeah, cool.
So let's talk about a couple more things. I think we've talked about the kosha lens, but you also weave in lived experiences of 50 postpartum women with whom you conducted interviews. And so you did that in the book. The book also includes practices, assessment tools, scripts, and worksheets. It sounds like really amazing resources. Can you talk about both of those aspects of the book, the interviews and then the resource part?
Yes. So I did the interviews via questionnaire because when I knew that I wanted to write the book, I had an inkling that I wanted to write. And I have to say, maybe others in your audience are writers and know this feeling. It's a terrible feeling to be a writer because you are constantly harassed by your own thoughts. It's not enough to just have an idea, but then you have to do something with the darn thing. And it just gets louder and louder, right? Until you do. So I had the idea to write the book, and I was kind of floundering because I knew my own experience and I knew that there was something there to it. And I also knew that my experience was very different from other women's experiences. For example, all three of my births, one of which was twins, and was in an hospital operating room, but it was also vaginal. So I've only had vaginal births. So I needed to hear from women who'd had cesareans. I needed to hear women who'd had VBACs. I needed to hear from women who'd experienced other things besides postpartum depression, which was something that I worked through. I breastfed my children despite many challenges, but I needed to hear from women who weren't able to breastfeed. So I knew that I needed more than just my life experience to inform what women would want to learn about through this text. So I conducted these 50 interviews via questionnaire and aggregated the data and then used each kosha, because I broke down the questionnaire into koshas, to point me in directions. So if a woman mentioned a condition, then I researched it. And if I felt like there was a high enough prevalence for it to be something that would be useful to, like a yoga therapist was likely to see this in her postpartum practice, then I included it in the book. And I did that throughout the koshas, which is how you get more than just depression and anxiety. So many women I interviewed talked about not knowing who they were after motherhood. Who am I? I don't know. I'm not my old self. I'm not really a new self yet. So that's why there's a section on identity. So many women talked to me about how disappointed they were because their birth turned out differently. So there's a section on disappointment and shame and the guilt that can arise from the shame. So I tried to flesh the book out based on not just what you might consider the kind of like postpartum 101 conditions, but really a breadth and depth that would paint a more comprehensive picture. And I knew that the only way to get that was to go to the source of postpartum experience. And so it helped me shape the book. And you'll see snippets of their experience introducing each of the koshas, because it's what helped guide my writing and my conceptualization of the koshas. And then the second question, remind me?
Of course. So the resources. So you've got worksheets, scripts, assessment tools, practices.
It felt really important to give yoga therapists tools that they could use, to include tools that I use, like body awareness, Scale of Bodily Awareness and Disassociation by Cynthia Price, who has a concept that she has researched extensively that is very similar to the one that I presented in Disordered Body Awareness. It's very separately, but at the same time, I kind of must have been in the kind of Gestalt universal consciousness that we both came to this idea. And with her permission, published her scale in the book as a resource, because I don't know that many people are aware of it. One of my good friends and colleagues and also teachers at MUIH, Marlisa Sullivan, invited me to use a list of deepening statements, which I use with my clients. And it was through our work at MUIH, through our first year cohort, I think helped her develop these. That's included as a resource. But then, among others, a full list of the scales and additional resources, again, is found on my site. So things that we couldn't publish in the book by virtue of space. My publisher really, if anybody has a copy, you'll see that the table of contents is 2-columned, because that's one of the ways that we saved some space. I really pushed the word limit on this one. And so additional resources are found on my website. But it felt very, very important to give people real, tangible protocols, and not just protocols that I thought of, but protocols that I have practiced and that I have utilized with clients. I mean, there's everything for each kosha, each condition. I point you toward a protocol. And how can I offer something without giving you tools to experience it in your own body, right? That's the essence of it. I truly believe that every great lesson in life that we understand cognitively doesn't actually matter until we embody it. Every lesson must be embodied before it becomes meaningful enough to be kind of transmuted or alchemized into what we might call wisdom.
That's a total nugget right there, and I'm with you. Thank you for it. I'm a believer too. Well, I can't wait to get the book, read the book, and I'm going to kind of wind down and switch gears a little bit with our last question, one that I pretty much always ask on the podcast, and that's just to kind of get more insight into you. So, you're a yoga therapist, you're an author, you're a licensed professional counselor, you're a mother of 4, and you're a practitioner of yoga. So tell us really how you bring your practices to your life to help you, on your journeys. What do your daily practices look like? Or tell us more about that, your sadhana.
I lead a teacher training. I've led a 200-hour teacher training for the last 8 years that my business partner and I developed around the kosha model. And I was just there this past weekend, and I was teaching kind of the nuts and bolts of teaching. And I was saying, you got to practice these things as often as possible. So again, so that you can embody them, you teach what you embody. And I realized that, gosh, my yoga practice looks so different than it did when I did my first 200-hour teacher training. I was on the mat every single day, twice a day, 3 times a day, as much as I could get it. And now my yoga practice is walking my dog through the woods on our property. and making sure that I've got my phone on silent and paying attention to every footstep along the path. My yoga practice is getting my hands in the dirt in the garden, which I look forward to so much, gardening again this spring. My yoga practice is what I called in a piece that I wrote. I've got 2 Substack sites, by the way, one on yoga therapy and one on parenting while walking a spiritual path. If anyone's interested, can find those through my website. But I wrote a piece early on called Making the Moments of Motherhood Your Meditation. Because, especially with my baby, so before my most recent baby came along, I did get up at 5:30 because I've come to consider in my middle age the morning hours truly the most sacred. And so I would enjoy waking up early and having moments of quiet. It's also before the other kids are awake, right? So,
yeah.
you know those sacred hours where it's still quiet. But with a baby who I co-sleep with, who wakes me up 4 times a night, I'm not waking up at 5:30 anymore. So I have to make the moments of motherhood my meditation. I have to turn those walks into a meditation. I have to turn gardening into a meditation. But you know what else I have to turn into a meditation? Those moments when I feel my frustration and anger spike, and my children are all yelling because they're all hungry, and I have to say to myself, this present moment is all I have, and I'm going to take a deep breath. And I'm going to watch these challenging sensations that are rising in my body. I'm going to watch them pass. And maybe I'm going to tap my chest because I know that little bit of gentle pressure on my chest helps me navigate the feeling of stress and anxiety. And yes, sometimes even rage that are building because of overwhelm and fatigue. And right now I'm going to watch these sensations and do my darndest to not react to them, because this is life. And this is all that there is. And no, I don't necessarily have today the 20 minutes that I'd hoped for a consistent sit with no one interfering. But what I do have right now is the opportunity to be present with this feeling as it arises, knowing that it will crescendo, and knowing that at the apex of that there is the descent, and it will pass. And that has become my yoga as I navigate the thick of having little children in a challenging world, the breath by breath, moment by moment knowledge that I can sustain myself through moments of challenge and watch them pass and become stronger and more resilient and more loving and compassionate because of them, not despite them.
So beautiful. Thank you so much, Julia, for this conversation today, for the work you've done, that you're doing, for sharing it with us. It's really been such a joy to talk with you.
Thank you. It really, truly has. I really appreciate it. And I love what you are doing. Thank you for making this work accessible to the world.
If you'd like to learn more about who we are and what we do, visit us at innerpeaceyogatherapy.com.